Oh man. Action. Hello, hi, Miniano. My name is Naa Momo and you are welcome to my tiny little corner of YouTube. A little bit about me: I'm a guy enthusiast, literature enthusiast, makeup enthusiast, and aloo YouTuber. Today's video is the first in a series that I'm starting called Books and a Beat, where I'll be reviewing a book that I've read like within the month before. And I'll be doing that in a makeup look based on the cover of the book. I'll be focusing mainly on the length and breadth of African literature. It won't be limited to just fiction and whatever, but I'm hoping that over the next few months I can, one, stop being a lip service reader and actually read the books, and two, give you guys like recommendations on what I think would be interesting to read while also serving you a few looks. Also, disclaimer, I'm going to try and plan outfits around the colors of the book, but I'm barely a fashion killer, so don't come for me, please and thank you. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, and hopefully I'll be super consistent over the next few weeks, okay? So today's book is called His Only Wife. It's by Peace Adzo Medie. I believe this is the author's very first novel, and I think she did a phenomenal job. I would most definitely read something else from her. The colors for my look today are inspired by the cover of the book. There are two women figures on the book, and I'm a woman and I'm a figure. So one, two, the background is like a pattern of pastel colors. I didn't have a lot of pastel colors, but the ones that jumped out to me the most were the blues. And so my dress, it's a dress, but you can only see the top. My dress is a pastel blue situation. This necklace is like blue and purple, and my eye look ties in with the necklace because it's mainly blue, but then there's like a little purple in the inner corners. My earrings kind of match the shape and color of the necklace, especially when I'm far away like this. So yeah, that's my very first beat and fits for the cover of the book. Unfortunately, I couldn't give you braids like the women on the cover have, but it's okay. I gave you a look regardless. The story follows the life of Afi and, you know, her mom after one of the rich women in their town approaches them to help her with a little situation that she's having within her family. So the length of the book is focused on Afi's journey from being recruited to be this helper to coming into her own. Unfortunately, because I haven't been reading as much as I should, I can't compare it to any other story that I've read, but maybe you have. You can leave the recommendations down in the comments and I'll take a look at them too. So I'm gonna start with a character overview. If the sequence in which I do this feels very familiar to you, maybe you were a literature student in senior high school, because that's really what I'm doing. I'm doing like a character overview, and like we're looking at the themes and then we'll look at the narrative. First off, the character that stood out to me the most was obviously Afi. She was a pretty good representation of what trajectory your life can take with certain circumstances, more specifically the ones that she was in. So I'm going to try my best not to give you too many spoilers in case you want to read it for yourself. But basically, Afi, small town girl trying to do things for herself or her mom, and had this seemingly perfect opportunity thrown her way, and you know, she got there and everything was on what she had been told it was. The change for Afi was so big, and I thought it was interesting to watch her evolve to basically a bad bitch who does whatever she wants, quite frankly, because that's what we get at the end of the novel. And the Afi at the end of the novel is so very different from the Afi at the beginning of the novel. Her husband is called Elikem. You know when they say somebody is polygamous, but they're the only person who knows that they're polygamous? That's Eric. And it's for like a lot of different reasons, I feel. So there are traditions within many different cultures that allow a man to take more than one wife. Ellie is one of those men, and he really stood in it. The first person that he wanted to get with, his family didn't approve of, and that is why Afi was brought into the equation, right? Afi was given the impression that if she comes in and does what she needs to do, that whole situation will scatter, but it didn't. Quite frankly, I feel like Ellie is the poster boy for you can't keep someone who doesn't want to be kept, because that man did not want to be kept. Okay, he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. He leaned into the allowances that tradition had given him with regard to being of a certain social status, and so being given certain concessions. I feel like he's a complex character who claims to love his wife but also loves his mistress, who isn't really his mistress because she was his first woman before Afi was conscripted to enter this war zone. The next person is Afino. Okay guys, before I continue, I'm not very confident in my pronunciations of some of these words, but then basically this is Afi's mother. She's also called Olivia, so I think I'll just refer to her as Ma Olivia and keep it safe. A little backstory for Afi's mother. Afi's father and Afi lived in Accra. After Afi's father passed away, she had to move to Ho to live with Afi's father's older brother. They had to depend on Afi's uncle, who wasn't giving them much anyway. There was some familial things that happened prior to her husband's death that made her disliked among her husband's family. So that dislike really came to the fore when they moved. What Afi's uncle wasn't providing for Afi and her mother, she would get from Ellie's mother. And so that relationship evolved into a kind of, oh, she's done so much for me, if I can repay her in any way, I will. And that's how Afi ended up betrothed to Ellie, and then all of this happened. I also thought it was interesting how different she was from Elikem's mother, who I may here and after refer to as Mrs. Ganyu. Mrs. Ganyu came across in the beginning of the novel as very sweet, very worried about her son, very willing to help. But later in the novel we realize that the PR and the branding is solid, but when you remove the cover and you look at the things, question mark. The next person that I thought was interesting is Evelyn. Evelyn is the secret girlfriend of one of Ellie's brothers. She's secret because Mrs. Ganyu doesn't like her. Why doesn't Mrs. Ganyu like her? Go and read and find out. It's the silliest thing. But basically Mrs. Ganyu doesn't like her, and she's come to accept that and the nature of their relationship. So when Afi is wringing her hands about Ellie, she reassures her that everything is okay. Later in the novel, her tune kind of changes, but then it's pretty much consistent. Another very important person is the other woman, because she's honestly the main reason for all the hullabaloo that we're reading about. She commits many offenses to Mrs. Ganyu. First, she's a foreigner. Second, she doesn't value Ellie's family and their tradition. So when they come around and they're trying to do the traditional things concerning him and her and their budding family, she doesn't care, and that rubs Mrs. Ganyu so wrong that she feels that the only way we're going to get rid of this person is to bring another person. While I was reading, I thought her being referred to as the other woman was such a funny thing, because technically she was there first. She's not the other woman. If you follow the logic that dictates who the other woman is, that is the other woman. Doesn't matter that she's been married. Next, we're going to get into the theme, or at least what I thought was the theme of the book. The largeness of tradition, especially in a Ghanaian context, came to the fore for me. And it wasn't just tradition, but breaking free from tradition, right? So there are the basic traditions like marriage, you know, and the institutions within marriage that shape people's lives. For example, Afi and her mother having to move back to where her father is from to live with her uncle, because that's what, you know, tradition calls for. That's what they needed to do to survive. The marriage ceremony between Afi and Ellie as like a ceremonial tying of the knots between two families. The ceremony as a declaration of a family tie, and Afi feeling like she was the key to somebody's happiness, victory, and vindication. When I read that portion first, I thought it was just with regard to the marriage, but then it kind of unfurled further in the plot, not just to encompass the marriage between her and Ellie and the marriage between her family and Ellie's family, but, you know, her journey to her inner compass pointing towards herself being the most important person. Does that make sense? I hope it does. It also brought to the fore the tradition of, you know, richer family members being in better positions to help their family, and so they would support their less well-off family members in any way. Afi's father and her uncle, because her uncle, who's a Busiapinin, is the one who saw Afi's father through school. There's also the thing about these family members who you look to for assistance holding these things over your head. And this is Afi's uncle to some degree. Apart from Afi's uncle, Mrs. Gani is also very guilty of that, because she feels like she plucked Afi from the village where she was barely making ends meet and thrust her into this lifestyle of wealth and riches and success, and the only thing she asked her to do was to rid her son of that blasted foreign woman and bring him home. And that's not very clear in the way they speak to each other at the beginning of the novel, but by the end she's kissing the girl. Grandma, stop. There's also the tradition of, which is not necessarily a Ghanaian tradition, but it's a result of many different Ghanaian traditional ways of living. You minimize yourself in fundamental ways because of family and society. And I'm looking mainly at Afi and her mother. I think the overarching way that tradition was represented in the novel was as a set of rules that you can follow or choose not to follow, quite frankly. Afi did all of that and didn't get the results that she wanted. So what did she start to do? She started to prioritize herself in a way that would be considered to be defying authority. And if there's anything old people hate, is you telling them no when they've given you instructions. You might as well slap them in the face. And you know it's true. I'm doing my very best not to give too much of the plot away. And if that didn't work, I'm very sorry. This is my first one, so hopefully I'll get better. Now, the narrative, I thought the narrative unfolded at a really good pace. It was easy to place myself in that world, and I don't know if it's because I'm Ghanaian or because it was so well written. It's probably a combination of the two. The very last thing was the pressures and pains in the evolution of mother-daughter relations, right? Especially from like an obedient, dutiful daughter point of view. That dynamic is present in a lot of different things, not just who you are marrying and why you're marrying them, why you're studying what you're studying, why you are wearing what you're wearing, why you're eating what you're eating, why you're eating the way you are eating, why you are behaving how you are behaving, why you are prioritizing what you are prioritizing. Overall, I enjoyed this book, not only because of how it represented the struggles of coming into yourself with all these different factors in play, and I hope that if you've enjoyed this rambling, which I didn't plan as well as I should have, you feel the same and you go and get you a copy. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for visiting my little corner of YouTube, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.